Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John McDougall. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book. And before we get started with tonight's event, I wanted to make a couple of quick store announcements to let everybody know kind of what's going on with us. So we're super excited this last Sunday, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, we've officially reopened on Sundays. This is the first time that we've been open on a Sunday since March of last year. So we're super excited about that. We changed our hours a little bit. So we're open on Sundays from 12 to 5 now. So hope that you guys will come check Brenda and Sally out and come say hi to them now that they're there, and we'll be open through the first of the year going forward. We'll be open on Sundays. Again, last weekend, we got to host our first in-store event since March of 2020. We did an in-store Murder by the Book Recommends, and we're going to finish out the rest of this year with virtual author events. And then we started to book some in-store events for January and February of next year. So as you look at the event calendar for next year, you'll see some events will either be listed as virtual or in-store. So, as long as the world doesn't fall apart in the next month, which who knows, it's happened before. We tried to do this earlier in the summer, but so at the moment, the plan is we're going to get some authors back in store, and we'll still be doing some virtual stuff too. And eventually, once we kind of get our feet back under us with in-store stuff, we're going to figure out a way to start broadcasting the in-store stuff virtually, so you'll be able to see that too. So I hope that you will come visit us. Also wanted to mention, if you are not aware, we do have a couple of subscription boxes that are perfect holiday gifts. One of them is specifically a cozy subscription. So if you want to have us pick out and ship you a cozy every month, you can visit us at it's murderbythebox.com or the Murder by the Book website and get more information about that. We have a lot of fun picking them out. So I hope that you will check those out. Also wanted to mention real quick before we get going tonight, I'm going to be chatting with Paige Shelton next Tuesday, the 7th at 7 about her new kind of cozy thriller. The new one is called... it just completely went out of my head. It's the third in her Alaska series, and it is called Dark Night. And then next Thursday, the 9th, I'm going to be chatting with Laura Bradford and Cynthia Kuhn about their newest cozy releases too. So you guys will come back and check those out. While I'm chatting with Amanda and Michael tonight, if you have questions for them, either about the new book, previous books, writing process, any of that stuff, please post those in the live chats on YouTube or the comments on Facebook, and we will get to them in just a little bit. But for now, I'm going to get us started. I'm going to start with Amanda and bring her out. How are you tonight, Amanda?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you again. Thank you so much for inviting Michael and I here tonight.
Oh, my pleasure. So Amanda's newest release is Marriage Can Be Mischief. It is the third in the Amish Matchmaker Mystery series and just came out on Tuesday. So Amanda Flower is the USA Today bestselling and Agatha Award-winning mystery author of over 25 novels, including the nationally bestselling Amish Candy Shop Mystery series, the Amish Matchmaker Mysteries, and several series written under the name Isabella Alan. An organic farmer and librarian, Amanda lives in Northeast Ohio. And next up, we're going to bring out MV Byrne. How are you tonight, Michael?
I'm very good, John. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
I like how festive your background is. We have not yet put up our tree. I think that's the plan for this weekend.
That's the day after Thanksgiving tradition.
Yeah. Michael, or MV Byrne, is the author of the Mitten State Mysteries. The second one, Isabel Puddles Investigates, also just came out on Tuesday. So MV Byrne was born in East Lansing, Michigan, and grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Although he spent summers on Lake Michigan with family, he later returned to East Lansing to attend Michigan State University. After years of living in both New York, NYC and LA, he settled in LA full-time, where he continues to work as a writer and producer in unscripted TV, though he can now add the title of author to his resume. And he is currently at work on the next Isabel Puddles Mystery. So as I mentioned, while we're chatting tonight, if you guys have questions out there, if you're watching, if you have questions, please post those. We will get to those in a little bit. But I'm going to start us off real easy. We're going to start with Amanda. Can you tell everybody a little bit about Mischief Can Be Murder and what our characters are up to in the new book?
So in the new book, in this series, my protagonist is a 68-year-old Amish widow who's also a matchmaker, and she and her best friend Lois, are out solving mysteries in Amish country. Lois is not Amish at all. She's been married 4 times, divorced 3 of those times, widowed once. And in this mystery, they are solving a cold case that happened 40 years ago. And it's really built around those ubiquitous, I'm not saying that word correctly, but those Amish restaurants that are all over Amish country with the long buffet. And so that's kind of the central location of the story. And in this one, they, of course, get into trouble with the Millie's goats as well. So it's a fun buddy mystery series, and it's really fun to write.
I can't find what I did with them because I looked for them earlier this afternoon. But after I finished the first 2 books before we did the Cozy Con last summer, Larissa from Kensington was like, "Oh my gosh, we had these little mini goats that we sent out with the books." And then I sent you a couple of the little tiny goats, but I could not find them anywhere. I think they're in my closet from when we reorganized our library earlier this spring. So I think that's where they went. But I was really hoping I could find them today, and I unfortunately couldn't.
That's okay.
Yeah. And Michael, so can you tell us a little bit about what Isabel is up to in Isabel Puddles Investigates?
Well, after her success in solving the case in book 1, she decided to get her private investigator's license, and she set up shop above the hardware store where she works. And in this story, a young man goes missing off the Badger, which is a ferry boat that runs between a ship, I should say, that runs between Manitowoc, Wisconsin, and in this story, Wellington, Michigan. And he is the nephew of a very wealthy beer heiress from Milwaukee named Abigail Bachmeyer Beer. I pitched this story to John at Kensington as a Miss Havisham character, and he said, "You had me at Miss Havisham." So she's she's a bit of a recluse and a mystery to the people who live in Gull Harbor. But she hires Isabel. Isabel assumes it's to look for her, or to try to find out what happened to her nephew. But it turns out Abigail has something else in mind. So that's where the story launches.
Perfect. So you both have sleuths that are older. It's really funny to see kind of how the cozy genre has swung. You know, it used to be we had older sleuths, then we had kind of 40s, 50s, middle-aged sleuths, and then younger. And so it's kind of funny to see how they kind of swing back and forth age range with characters. So what made you guys decide to have these series have older sleuths as your main characters? Let's start with Amanda.
In my case, Kensington, the Amish Matchmaker Mysteries, which this is part of, is a spinoff of the Amish Candy Shop Mysteries. And Kensington was interested in a spin-off series, and in the other series, my protagonist is like a 30-something New York City transplant to Amish country, so she's very much like a fish out of water and younger. So I wanted to make the new protagonist is absolutely different because they're in the same world, as different as possible. So I was like, first of all, she has to be Amish. And to make her older, to be from a different generation, I think was the answer. And it's been so much fun to write. And I've really enjoyed it. And it's been fun to see, a lot of our readers are, of the age of Millie and Lois. And so I think they appreciate seeing their peers out there solving murders.
Yeah. How about you, Michael?
Well, excuse me. The older I get, the more interesting I find older people, for one thing. But also, the Isabel character is loosely based on my Aunt Isabel, who is my mother's fraternal twin sister. And obviously, she's just one of the funniest people I've ever known. And she was, she was in her 50s when I had this germ of an idea. And so it just made sense. I don't know. I think that's a good age. some people think she's older. I don't really get caught up in that. I'm very coy about dates, and she never mentions her age. And I don't want to assign an age to her, but she's somewhere between 50 and death.
Well, that's smart too, because then you don't have to worry, if it's a nice long series, and you don't have to worry about the fact that at some point she's too old to solve these mysteries. You've done that work up front, so you don't have to like slow it down as you go.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I wish I had done that.
One of the things I think that it's really great too, one of the things I love about cozies is they give authors and readers a place to talk about other issues. Like in Amanda's book, you touch on domestic abuse, but one of the things that you guys also both do in the books is, you have these older women who are no longer married, and they have financial issues, so they have to, they all have these kind of side hustles to kind of keep going. So I think it's really interesting. It's a really great way to be able to explore kind of what it's like for that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Let's start with Amanda.
Yeah, in Millie's case, she definitely kind of has to diversify to make a living. Her husband's been gone for 20 some years, and especially being Amish, where in their cultures there's a lot of things that are not open to women to do as far as an occupation. So she makes majority of her money off of quilting by hand with her quilt circle, and then also she works at her niece's greenhouse part-time to earn a little extra money and also to help her niece. So it's definitely a lot of the older people that I know in my own life have to do that in real life too. So it definitely fits, and I'm glad I got to show that in the series.
Yeah. And I love, Michael, with yours, I love how Isabel has like a ton of side hustles. And I love kind of at the beginning of this one, she's like, okay, now that I have my PI license, that's still not paying bills, but like, I'm not doing the pickles anymore, I'm doing this. So I love that she also has all of these other side jobs too.
She's got a lot of plate spinning.
Yeah.
But her objective is to hang on to her home. She lives on a lake, and she's got vacant lots on either side that she owns that are not bringing in any income, but she's determined not to sell them. And the property taxes are killing her. And I watched my Aunt Isabel go through this. And she later in life ran into some financial difficulties after having worked in the family business for many years. And so, but she hustled. She went out and got a real estate license, and she always collected antiques. So it was sad, but she took a lot of her favorite antiques to the antique barn and set up a booth there. Mm-hmm. And she just did what she had to. She was not a cook. She would never have made any money doing anything in the kitchen. But so it was difficult to watch her sort of become this so aware about money and have to be so frugal. But it was also inspiring. She never complained. She just did what she had to do. And she was having some issues with property taxes because she wanted to maintain her house on the lake. Mm-hmm. And it's cost prohibitive these days if you're anywhere near water. Mm-hmm. So she inspired me in that way.
Yeah, my in-laws have a lake house, and they live there, but so they deal with that all the time too. It's one of the things I like both, since we're talking about this. Money is not a thing that you see come up in cozies a lot, and a lot of times you have these younger characters who have moved back to their small town and they're starting their lives over, and they start these small businesses, and it's like it's always fine. And being someone who has worked at a small business for 11 years, I know it's not that easy, and it's not just like, oh, we have this money to do this, it's all good. So it's nice to see that it gives a little bit more kind of a real world flavor to both of the books, to see kind of the characters dealing with that. One of the things I think you guys also both have in common and also do really well is your characters both have these really fun sidekicks that kind of keep them on their toes. So can you talk, let's start with Michael this time. Can you talk a little bit about your character's sidekick?
Well, my mother and my aunt were like a comedy team. My mother played the straight man, and but my mother's very funny, but she was very dry. My Aunt Isabel could sometimes be completely over the top. She was the sort of person who would just command a room telling a joke, and she would get up and act things out. And it was, she was very, very entertaining. But I needed Isabel to have some, she couldn't be too over the top. So what I think without even realizing what I was doing, I made Frances, her sidekick, sort of the alter ego of my aunt. And so they're sort of 2 in 1. And there's a little bit of my mother in there too. So yeah, it's, but honestly, Frances is more fun to write because Isabel, you have to, you have to keep her on course. Frances just is notorious for saying anything that pops into her head, usually inappropriate. And so she's a fun character.
Yeah, I love the scene where she's talking about it's been a minute since I've read it, but there's a scene where she's talking about some character and she's essentially like, oh, it would just be better off if he died. And they're like, no, you can't say that. Like, Frances, what are you saying? No. So yeah, I love the dynamic between the two of them. How about you, Amanda? Can you tell us a little bit about Lois?
Yeah, I have the same situation as this Frances. I love writing Lois because she is she says whatever pops in her head. She has this like magical, not really magical, but like this purse that she carries everywhere that she has the most random stuff in. And my mom used to carry like an enormous purse, and there would be like crazy stuff in there, like staplers and all kinds of stuff. So that's kind of based on my mom. And she's just so fun to write. And the reason I created her, she's a foil to Millie. Like, she is as opposite from Millie as you can possibly be. Millie is, a very quiet and thoughtful Amish, matronly person, and Lois isn't. And how they were able to have a friendship is they grew up on the same country road and had neighboring farms. So they've been friends since they were teeny girls, and they just kept in touch. So I think it's fun because even though they don't necessarily agree anything, Millie just accepts her for who she is, and the fact that, takes into account she's been married multiple times, and she likes to gamble and go up to the casino in Cleveland and all kinds of fun stuff. So she's really fun to write. She's like one of those characters like, oh, I wish she was real. Like, she would be a great, like, fun aunt to have.
She reminds me, I had a great aunt, Teresa, who lived very close to an Amish community, but she was just like Lois. So when I read them, I always kind of imagine that sort of like what her day-to-day interactions with the people in her community would be like, because she was like as far as from Amish as you could get to.
Yeah.
So last night I chatted with Darcy Wilde, whose new Rosalind Thorne book came out. And so one of the things that I was asking her, hers are historical. So I was asking her if she considered the historical books that she did cozy or not. And she said that they were a little bit more, she would call them more traditional mystery because they don't have the sense of community that cozies do. And, that's definitely something that's really prevalent and important in both of your books, is that sense of community. And I know Michael PW compared your series to the Lake Wobegon books. And I think because you do all these really great character sketches, like as a character comes in, it's not just like, this is the person who works at the post office. You get a little bit of their backstory. So can you talk a little bit about how you build a sense of community as you're writing these?
Well, I'm writing about a real community. So that's part of it. I fictionalized it, but although I grew up in California, I spent my summers in Michigan, and my family are all small town people. And small towns are just filled with eccentric, quirky people. And I've just, I think it always struck me because I grew up in a very progressive beach community in Northern California. And so in the summers, it was like being transported to another planet. And I was just fascinated by these characters. It didn't take a lot of effort to create this sense of community, because I think that's important. That's part of the charm of these cozy mysteries, and the characters just sort of, if you don't give them some personality, even if they are just somebody at the post office, It's just flat. And why not? And you can really sum up a person in just a few descriptive sentences, or give them a line that is funny, or says something about their character.
Yeah.
So that's it just makes the writing process more entertaining, and hopefully more entertaining for the reader.
Yeah. And how about you, Amanda?
In my case, it's a small town already. It's really based on Sugar Creek, which is a real town in Amish country in Ohio. But in particular, doing Amish fiction, like their whole culture is built around community. Like that is why they don't let their members drive, is because their belief is if they allow people to drive, then they'll move to California. They'll move away from the community. So by limiting their ability to travel, you keep them in the same place. So so it was really easy within an Amish community to build that. And then in Holmes County, I used to live in Amish country when I was younger, as a young librarian. I used to be a librarian before I wrote full time. And the Amish and the English, as they call us, interact constantly. And it was like when I started, I was asked to write Amish by my agent, and I didn't think it was like, because I grew up there, I didn't think it was strange to see Amish people, but I've since learned that there's a lot of people that come to Ohio and they're like, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah, I grew up in Delaware before we moved to Texas. So like we would always, like on the weekends, we would go to the Amish flea market and the Amish produce market. So yeah, it's so it wasn't your idea originally to write Amish. Your agent gave you the idea?
Well, she steered me in that direction. So this was probably 12 years ago. And I was just pitching ideas to her because I had one cozy out. It finaled for the Agatha for Best First. So I was like, okay, this is the time to strike, as far as like getting a foot in the door. And so I was pitching ideas to her, and she didn't like any of my ideas at all. So like I kind of like a Hail Mary. I was like, well, I used to live in Amish country, and it was like the height of the Amish romance time. And she actually wanted me to write Amish romance, and I was like, no, can I kill them? Like I'm a mystery author. Like this is I'll write what mystery you want me to write, but I write mystery. Like that's my lane. So she agreed, and now here we are, so many books later.
And I imagine writing Amish I imagine it's got to be helpful and frustrating to get around technology, because you don't have to worry about cell phones and all of that, but at the same time, you can't just have your character pick up a cell phone and call if they need to.
Yeah, it could certainly be frustrating, which is one thing. Another reason I gave her Lois being her best friend, because Lois drives her everywhere. Like if she had to go by buggy to all these suspects, it would take forever. But in the book, I'm actually writing the 4th book in the series right now. And when I was writing that book, there was a situation where Millie's by herself and she's in real danger. And I was like, she needs to call for help. And I was like, uh-oh, like she can't. So what do I do? Like, there's this older woman in peril and she has no technology to call for help. So I need to figure that out before I turn the book in.
So, Michael, I imagine, going back to kind of the little character sketches that you do, I imagine that's also going to be super helpful, because as you build out the world more, you've got a bigger suspect pool, you've got a bigger potential victim pool. So since you were still early in the series, are you like keeping notes or like a series Bible? So as you go further along, you kind of can refer back to that as you write?
I'm not, but that's a very good idea. I should, because I find myself getting lost within the book even. And I have to go back and search like names and luckily I think I've caught whatever issues I've come across in both books. Yeah. I haven't heard otherwise, and I know readers are quick to tell you.
They will tell you.
So Yeah, in the third book, I pitched to John at Kensington, our editor, that I wanted to take Isabel abroad, and well, sometimes I think it was a mistake because I don't have that whole pool to draw from. I have to create a new cast of characters. It was a great idea, and I pitched it pre-COVID, thinking I could go to Cornwall, where this story takes place, and rent a place for a month and just do a first draft or just research, and then that became impossible. So then I was stuck, and I'd already turned in the outline, and John liked it, and so then I went back and I said, John, maybe we should keep her in Gull Harbor after all, because initially he was resistant to the idea. We like to keep them with a new series, keep them at home, and as you said, just build your cast of characters. And but then he said, no, I really like the idea now. Want her to go. So I had to start writing, just Googling whatever I could about Cornwall. I'd been to the UK a few times, but never to Cornwall. And I got hooked on the idea of Cornwall watching Poldark on Masterpiece Theater. So anyway, as luck would have it, and strangely enough, in May, I was hired by ITV Network in the UK to escort a family of Amish from Ohio to the UK, where they are participating in a reality show. So I learned that there are degrees of Amish.
Yes.
And this family are, they're more progressive than most. So the idea for the reality series is called The Simple Life, and it probably is about to air. I think they're back in the States now. But they're teaching people from London who want to simplify their lives, and they move on to this farm, and this husband and wife and their 3 kids are showing them how to live the simple life, and they do all the Amish stuff, and they also they have a singing group. The family, we call them the Amish Von Trapps. But I had never hung out with Amish people, so I've always been fascinated by them. And there's a lot of Amish in Michigan and Western Michigan, and Mennonites and Dunkards, and I always found them fascinating. So my job was to fly from Palm Springs to Cleveland, where I would meet them, and then escort them first to Washington, and then fly to London, and then I would hand them over to a producer from ITV at Heathrow, and then I would be, to be honest, it was a free trip to the UK for me. Yeah. The Amish, that's 12 hours. And but it was a free round trip ticket, and I figured I'll go to Cornwall and I can do my research. But I had to quarantine for 10 days in London, and so I got a lot of writing done. And then I went to Cornwall, and I was fascinated with the place, and I was able to do that research. But yeah, these people were so lovely. I'm still in touch with them, and I learned so much about. And they had no problem with me asking questions about, and I would ask the stupid questions like, do you travel by horse and buggy? Like, well, sometimes, yes. Yeah. They don't drive, but they were just lovely, lovely people. And I think I might have to find a way to introduce more Amish characters if there is a fourth. I don't know if there's going to be a fourth Isabel Puddles, but anyway, I'm going back to my book is due February 1st, and I'm locked into that. And I'm starting to wake up with anxiety attacks because I just got her to London. And so anyway, I'm actually going to London in 10 days spend some time for Christmas. So I'm saving that chunk of Isabel in London. Hopefully when I'm there, I'll be inspired. But what was the question? Well, I just went off on a tangent.
Yeah. That was really interesting, though.
No, that's good. Yeah, so it's about the secondary characters. That's great. So Amanda, do you have so you've been running the Amish series for a while, but do you have like Amish beta readers that you give the book to, or do you have people that you can ask questions to make sure you get the details right?
Not beta readers, but there's people that I ask the questions of. When I started writing, I think the Matchmaker's probably my 4th series about Amish. So, especially more when I was writing the first 2 series, one under the name Isabella Alan, I was asking questions all the time, and a lot of them came from there was a quilt shop that since closed in Sugar Creek, but I just walked in there one day, and it was run by a conservative Mennonite woman, who's very lovely, and my mom has since passed away, but my mom was alive at the time, and my mom can talk to anyone on earth, like, and I was feeling all shy to like go up and be like, so what do you guys do, and my mom was a Presbyterian minister too, so she was used to just going and talking to people. So my mom just sat down and like got all the info and told her I was writing a book. So I was pretty young at the time so I was feeling shy. So she took over. And then that woman stayed in touch with me ever since. So she now works actually for the Gospel bookstore in Berlin. And so she makes sure they stock my books, which I appreciate. And she sells, they have a little book booth in the flea market. So she doesn't work in the actual bookstore. She just sits in this little booth. And she's about Millie's age now. And I'm just so grateful for her. And then in addition to that, when I was a librarian in Amish country, one of the librarians I worked with was really involved with Amish runaways. So he would help them get social security numbers and birth certificates, stuff like that they don't have necessarily. So I learned a bunch from him, and also some of the former Amish young men that he was helping answered a ton of my questions too. So I've been really lucky with those connections.
And since both this series and then the Candy Shop series are both kind of set in the same world, do you have any kind of like outline or notes so you know kind of where characters are for timeline?
Well, I kind of know where they are, timeline age-wise, and I keep a very good calendar because the stories actually alternate. They're in the same timeline. So I try to make sure that, like, if I write a Millie book, it's not summer, a month before a Bailey book if they're out of order. So I keep an eye on that. I do wish that I had a character Bible because, like, I don't. I should have done that because at this point, I think with all the books, this is like the 13th book set in Harvest because there was a set of novellas as well. So like I do have to do the same thing Michael said. I was like, oh my gosh, what was that person's name? And something that I struggle with the most is people's eye color. So I'll go through an old book, either on my Kindle or just on a Word document and search for the word eyes just to see if I can figure out what color. Like, I know my main character, but there could be like a secondary character. Did I give them an eye color? Am I like committed to blue? Like, what's going to happen? Because readers know, I if there's a mistake, they are on it, and I will get the email.
So you mentioned librarian, and Michael, we mentioned that you are a script writer too. So we'll start with Michael. Does the script writing, do you think that helps with your fiction writing? Or is it a completely different skill set?
It really is a completely different skill set. I mean, this is writing books is much more artful, hopefully. Writing for TV, as unscripted TV, is it's just a craft that you hone. And so I'm always writing in somebody else's voice, either for, I've written for a wide range of on-air talent, from I worked on Good Morning America for a while, so I was writing like kind of serious journalism. Well, I was in the 8 o'clock hour, so it wasn't that serious. So I would write for Diane Sawyer and Charlie Gibson and Robin Roberts. But I wrote for Nancy Grace, which I'm not even going to talk about. And I've written for Tyra Banks. And so I'm always writing in someone else's voice, not always women. I just did a show and William Shatner was the host. So I was writing for Captain Kirk. So that's, and I seem to have an ear for picking up on the cadences and people's, the way they talk. And you have to be mindful of, there's certain letters they have a difficult time with. There's certain words. And there was one talent who I won't mention who didn't like words that had more than 3 syllables. So that's stuff you just have to take into account. So it doesn't feel like art. I mean, you can sometimes weave some copy that might pass as elegant, and you have to be mindful of alliteration because TV runs on alliteration, or like unscripted copy does. So yeah, I don't think, other than just building my confidence as a writer, to finally do this. I always wanted to write books, and I just thought, well, I'm just kind of stuck in plan B, and it's where my resume is. And I guess, I still like the whole food and shelter thing. So I'll just keep doing this. And then one day I'll write a book. And so here I am.
And how about you, Amanda? Did being a librarian and sort of knowing kind of the book world, did that help with the author stuff, or is the librarian end of it completely different from the author end?
It helped tremendously, because I knew what was popular and what people were reading in fiction. I also, I know how to navigate a library events, like how to communicate with librarians as far as like enticing them to order my books and things like that. And then also, it's just, I was a librarian for 15 years full time, and I was 10 of those years I was also writing 10 books full time too. So it allowed me to build a very large network of librarians. And I found librarians love to buy books written by librarians. So like, as a like a tribe or whatever, we like to support each other. So it's been very helpful. And when I made the decision, I left the library world professionally in 2018. It was a very hard decision. And it wasn't just the fact leaving the health insurance, although that was pretty hard too. But it was just such a hard decision because I love helping people. I love being a librarian. I love, servicing the community. So that was a really difficult decision. And I stayed probably longer than I had to because I just loved the career so much.
Yeah. So we have a question from the crowd. We'll start with Amanda. Is there any romance in your books for your protagonist or your minor characters?
Yeah, so pretty much all my books, there are a romantic interest for my characters. Even in this series, the Matchmaker series, the mystery is really built around Uriah, who has had a crush on Millie since they were school children. I won't tell you how their relationship ends, but I think that is an important element in cozies. I think that's something that the readership looks for. So I include it in every book. It's certainly not the focus. The focus is always the murder, but I do like it as a subplot.
Yeah. How about you, Michael?
I actually introduced a possible love interest for Isabel at the end of book 2. A well-known British mystery writer who had read about Isabel's the case that she solved, because she got a lot of notoriety for it, and he wanted to meet her. And so it comes at the very end of the book, and he invites her to dinner, and that's where I left it. But Isabel's a widow. She's been a widow for at least 10 years, and it wasn't a great marriage anyway. I think the scene that you were referencing is where Francis says, dying was the nicest thing he ever did.
Yeah,
for you.
that's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
And so but she's resistant. She doesn't really, Francis is encouraging this relationship, and Isabel's like, I think he just wants to be friends. So they do, in book 2, they've been writing back and forth, and they actually write on paper and use stamps, and they're very old school that way. And he's invited her to his country house in Cornwall, and she's never been abroad. So finally she decides to accept his invitation, and it's all, she's going to stay in the guest house, and it's all very, very Jane Austen, and he's very gentlemanly. But of course, now Frances is doing everything she can to discourage her from going. She doesn't think it's a good idea, and wants to go with her. And this is the hard part, because I can't bring Frances over there until later, and their dynamic is so important. So I just have this really quirky, sort of rough around the edges housekeeper that's going to be her sidekick. And then I don't know where this relationship is going to go. I don't know. I don't think they can become romantically involved. I mean, he lives in London and she lives in Gull Harbor, Michigan, and neither one of them want to move, but maybe he will move. And you know what? I don't know what I would do with a husband. So I think I might have to kill him. I mean, that may have to be the solution.
So that was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask. There in a few series, like in Jen McKinley's Cupcake series, the character gets married, and in Kate Carlisle's Biblio Mystery series, the character is married. But we don't see a lot of married or even really kind of serious relationship stuff happen in cozies. Why do you think that is? I mean, there's dating, but there's not usually like that big commitment. Let's start with Amanda. Why do you think that we don't see more of that?
I think part of it is kind of goes back to the idea of similar in like television and sitcoms. Like if they get together, like it's over. And I think that's kind of ingrained into storylines. You want to keep people coming back to see if they will get together. And there's certainly been many series where it's like on and off again, and I'm not going to mention any names, but it goes on forever and ever, and people get tired of it. And in my case, I've had one of my series, a Magical Bookshop series, they do get married in the series, but then the series does end after that book. And then I've had a lot of characters get engaged, and then the engagement goes on forever and ever. So it's just one of those things. I think the funny thing is because my Candy Shop series has been pretty long now. I believe I'm writing the 8th book is the next one, so the 7th will come out sometime. And I'm starting to get emails. I have these 2 characters, the main character Bailey and the deputy she's been dating for, it seems like 46 years, or whatever it is. And the readers are starting to get a little upset with me about like, is he ever going to propose? So yeah, I'm going to have to come to terms with that, because I think the Candy Shop is set to go on for a while. So I'll have to, consult Jen McKinley or Kate Carlisle, be like, what do I do? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. How about you, Michael? Any thoughts there?
I don't think I have a good answer for that. In Isabel's world, she really is the only single person. All the other principal characters are married. And Frances has a rocky relationship with her husband, but so yeah, I think probably what Amanda said is a good point. People we're sort of locked into these romantic plot lines we see in television and sitcoms, and yeah, once it's like the dog that catches the bus. Then what? It's you lose the conflict. You use it's just not as fun anymore.
Yeah, I wish I could remember who said it so I could give them proper credit. But one author said one of the reasons they thought it was too is because once you actually like tie somebody down, married or in a really serious relationship, then you sort of limit the amount of times they can go out there and just like put themselves in danger. Like if you're married or you have kids, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm going to run down this dark alley in the middle of the night by myself to solve this mystery, because you're like, oh, I have people at home that are like relying on me to do stuff. So that sort of also kind of limits how much your characters can get away with on their own.
That's very true.
Yeah. So you mentioned, Amanda, that you have also written as Isabel Alan, and obviously, Michael, you're using initials in yours. So let's talk a little bit about pseudonyms. Amanda, what point did you decide to move from Isabella and go with Amanda Flower?
Well, my very first books were under my real name, which is Amanda Flower. And I sold that first Amish series to B&H Publishing, which was an inspirational publisher. At the same time, Berkeley approached my agent and said that they wanted an established cozy author in Ohio that knew Amish people to write a series for them. So it was like kind of like looking, or I was it, like as far as like someone that had that kind of unique experience. So they knew that I had sold this other series, so they said, in that case, we need to differentiate you, so can you change your name? And I was willing to do it because I wanted to get my foot in the door with Berkeley. So I wrote 6 books in that series, and then eventually they let me write under my real name, which started with the Magical Bookshop. So it was kind of a strategic move on my part.
It's always one of the fun things about cozies is they come in, and if it's a name you've never heard or an author, the first thing we always do is flip to that copyright page and say, who is this really? Do we know this person? And how about you, Michael? What was the decision to go with initials?
Well, I just deferred to Kensington and to John, and this is a whole new world to me. So I deferred to him in every way. He's a lovely man, and I trust him completely. So he was the one who insisted that Isabel Puddles go into the title of every book, and I had some lame name title, working title, and that was a great decision because the name is everybody seems to love the name Isabel Puddles. So I'm glad it is part of the title. I think the decision was to just make it sort of gender non-specific, because most cozy writers are women, and I think, I don't think that, and I guess most cozy readers are women. It doesn't mean they're not going to read cozies written by men, but I think maybe just on the shelf, or that's the only thing I can think of. I have been working on this other novel. I have been for a while, and if it's ever published, it's looking like it might be published posthumously at this point. But I will use my real name because nobody who reads these cozy mysteries would ever believe that this other book, the same person wrote this other book. So I think in the end, it's a good idea. But I wasn't sure at first, am I supposed to go by MV? Because first of all, it doesn't roll off the tongue easily to say it. And but I'm glad that I can go by Michael. Most people now, when I do these things, refer to me as Michael, which it makes I feel good about.
It's a little less awkward. I love him to death, but Dean James, who writes the Cat in the Stacks mysteries as Miranda, it's always interesting, especially talking to him, because when he used to be the manager at Murder by the Book for years. So when it comes to the store, everybody knows him. It's just Dean. But when you're interviewing him for like a virtual event, and he's technically Miranda, but you keep calling him Dean, you're like, you do the bio first. But yeah, so the initials work. They're a little bit easier than a straightforward women's name.
Right.
Well, Amanda Flowers is such a beautiful name. It sounds made up.
Oh, thank you. And people have said that to me before when I was writing as Isabella Alan, and then I also was writing as Amanda Flower. They did not believe that my real name was the Amanda Flower. I was like, no, you can look at my birth certificate. That's what it is.
So when you guys are reading for pleasure, do you read within the cozy genre? Do you read outside of it? And what's something that you've read lately that you've loved and enjoyed? Let's start with Amanda.
I do read cozies. I actually listen to a bunch of them like on Audible or, through the library, which I've been doing a ton while my husband and I've been building a house because, you can enjoy a story and get your head off the fact that you're cutting drywall. And so I don't remember the title, but I am currently listening to the first Jacqueline Frost mystery. It's like a Christmas Tree Farm series. I think Crooked Lane published it. So I'm listening to that one, and but I also really love historical mysteries. So Anna Lee Huber's series and Charles Todd. So those would be the things that I definitely gravitate to the most for pleasure.
Yeah. I really want to read those Jacqueline Frost ones. I love the Brie Baker and Julianne Lindsay ones. So the Jacqueline Frost ones are on my list.
It's really cute. It's really cute.
Yeah. And how about you, Michael?
I don't read a lot of cozies. I started reading them because as one of my oldest friends is Rick Kopp, aka Lee Hollis. So I read his cozies, and that's what's got me thinking about maybe trying one of these. But I'm afraid to read. I do want to read one of your books, Amanda, and but I don't want to be influenced too much. I'm afraid that things might seep in and unconsciously I'll end up stealing something. So I try to read. I have a sort of eclectic taste. I just finished a wonderful book called The 100-Year-Old Man Who Snuck Out the Window and Disappeared, which is the most cumbersome title ever. But it's translated, but it's a Norwegian author. And I just read this other Norwegian author who did a book called The Waiter. And for some reason, I'm just in a little Scandinavian. Then I just started a book called A List of Things That Didn't Kill Me, which I'm a little on the fence with right now. And I'm reading Movable Feast again for some reason. I just went through my bookshelves. It's one of my favorite books, and it's a quick weekend read. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the map with my choices.
And so we mentioned, we talked a little bit about upcoming stuff. Michael, you said you're working on number 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have 8 weeks.
Oh my gosh. And Amanda, what do you have coming up next?
My very next book is the 5th and final Magical Bookshop, and it comes out in January. It's called Crimes and Covers. But what I'm most excited about next year in July, I have my first historical mystery coming out. Ooh. And it's called Because I Could Not Stop for Death, and Emily Dickinson is the protagonist. I'm so excited.
Oh, wow.
And Berkeley's publishing it. So it's not a cozy, it's more of a traditional, and it's a little bit of departure for me. So it's both really exciting and very scary. So July 12th, I'll probably be sweating bullets when it drops.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I think that's going to about do it for us this evening. But to recap for anybody who might have joined us late, we have been chatting with Amanda Flower, whose 3rd book in the Amish Matchmaker series, Marriage Can Be Mischief, has just come out. And we've been chatting with M.V. Byrne, whose 2nd book in the Mitten State series, which is Isabel Puddles Investigates, has also just come out on Tuesday. If you are interested in copies of either of them, either these or the first in the series, we've got them all in stock. You can visit us at murderbooks.com. If you missed any part of our chat once we're done, Facebook and YouTube will archive them so you can go back and rewatch. We've also created a cozy virtual event playlist. So if you want to see the cozy panel that we did with Amanda and Michael last year with Rick Kopp, Barbara Ross, and Julie Ann Lindsay, that's all up on the YouTube channel as well. You guys both, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This was so much fun.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much
John.
for having us.
You guys have a good night, and we'll see you soon.
Thank
All
you.
right, bye.